Hello, my name is Hayden Rice, and my presentation will be on the new chronology and false history. So what is false history? New chronology is a type of false history. False history is when a person or a group of people attempt to mistreat, manipulate, or distort known history. A good example of false history is the Holocaust denial. Even though there is plenty of evidence to prove that the Holocaust did indeed happen, people are still denying it to this day. So, new chronology is a type of false history conspiracy theory that states that the chronology of European and Middle Eastern history is incorrect. It states the events attributed to the Roman Empire, ancient Greece, and ancient Egypt happened during the Middle Ages, 1,000 years later than they have been officially stated to have taken place. The reason why the new chronology has started in the first place is because there's a group of people that question the chronology of events in history, and they believe the chronology given to events that happened is false, is a lie. Now, while people had discussed the idea of a new chronology or an incorrect chronology, it really became popular and really truly started with Antonio Fomenko. Antonio Fomenko was a Russian mathematician. In the 1980s, Fomenko, with the help of a few other of his colleagues from Moscow State University, published a few mathematical methods that they try to use to explain what the true history of the world was in their peer-reviewed articles. Now, these articles had garnered some controversy for, them stating that the history of the world was not actually correct. But despite this controversy, Fomenko failed to convince respected historians to take his side in this theory. In the 1990s, Fomenko decided to shift his attention from trying to garner attention in the scientific community to instead publishing books that will talk about the new chronology. Fomenko and his colleagues were discovered in the 1980s by the Soviet science press, which led to a brief period of renowned contemporary review. Fomenko had grown to cover Russia, Turkey, China, and Europe in the new chronology as well. So what are some elements of the new chronology? Fomenko claims that traditional chronology consists of 4 overlapping chronologies and that have been pushed back in time, and that the events before the 11th century are fictional and are merely reflections of the events that had took place in the Middle Ages. It is also stated that the way that they created this lie was by repeating the events in history, in written history, and giving them different names. Now, here is one of the biggest elements of the new chronology book, the Avars Slav Turk Empire. Fomenko also states that at the center of the new chronology is the existence of the Avars Slave Turk Empire, or as Fomenko calls it, a Russian horde that played a part in Eurasian history, and that the various groups in the world, like the Huns, the Goths, the Derby, the Pechenegs, and the Cossacks, are all nothing but elements of the Avars Slav Turk Empire. People have used this to claim that the new chronology is an attempt through the Avars Slav Turk Empire to make the history of Russia greater or more special than it actually is. The Avars Slav Turk Empire, because of this, has had a negative effect on the world, as groups that are listed as elements of this Russian horde are fighting to convince people who believe this theory that they are in fact independent groups and not a part of this Russian group that has been stated in the new chronology. So what kind of evidence does Fomenko say he has to prove that the new chronology is correct? One of the main things Fomenko used to support his theory was that the royal line of kings and queens from one era would be similar to the kings and queens of another era. Fomenko claimed that because of this was evidence that proved that historians have just been falsely writing the same events repeatedly to create the illusion of history going farther back when it actually hadn't. This can be proven false because there are documents that have been officially released that go into the history of the royal lines and prove that the royal heirs of kings and queens are not that similar at all. So, a question is, why do people believe in this crazy theory, the new chronology? One reason why people might believe it is because for Russian people, it points to a more glorious past for Russia than there actually was for their country. Imagine the Al-Vassal Turk Empire, this group that was a part of so many things. I mean, I think everyone wants to believe that their country is all powerful, and it's easy to believe theories that benefit our beliefs and our cultures. This can also apply to other cultures like America and people who believe in a Russian-ruled world. And this theory is just a way of expressing that idea. People could also believe this theory because they like the idea that it's this, there's the idea that all of these events happen at the same time and that the history we're told of has been a lie. And I think that supposed secret has an appeal to many people. Now, what's some evidence that proves this theory false? So for one, this conspiracy theory is not true, as there's plenty of evidence of documents that go in depth over the history of certain elements that disprove this theory, like was mentioned earlier. Ones, for instance, when he talks about kings and queens, there's documents that go into detail about the history and the lives of these kings and queens. And there are many other documents that also disprove his theory. Another evidence that disproves his theory is the using artifacts and using scientific dating. People can tell how far an artifact goes back. Some artifacts have been said to go as far back as thousands of years. Now, what are some logical fallacies? So first, there is a hasty generalization. Flamenco states that because these texts have rough translation and often got things wrong, that people, either intentionally or unintentionally, mistranslated the dates of these documents. This is not a good argument, because just because translation isn't perfect and there are mistakes, that doesn't mean that the dates are wrong, and it doesn't prove that his theory of the new chronology is correct. Another one is appeal to ignorance. Flamenco states that for many cases, the original documents are not available, and all we have are manuscripts from the 15th century and the 18th century. Flamenco uses this to say that because we do not have the original documents, that there is no proof that these events took place thousands of years ago. This can also be proven false, because even though we don't always have the original documents, that does not prove it is false, and there's plenty of other documents that help to prove that events did take place far ago. So, in conclusion, this is a pretty big theory, but it's also a little out there. But despite all of the logical fallacies and evidence that proves it wrong, there are still people that believe this theory. I think this shows that no matter how crazy and insane a theory is, as long as there are people to believe that theory, people will hold on to it tight and never let it go. Oh, and here is the reference page.